Okay, we've got a 1982 XR200R, and we are going to do a restoration on it. First thing we're starting on is we got the bike up on a, it's on a stand here so that we can work on the bike, and Joe just removed the front light here, and you can see we've got it disconnected already. The wires here on the top, all the colors where we disconnected it correspond with the colors on the headlight itself, so we didn't need to mark anything there. So we got the headlight done, so we're going to get that out of the way. Okay, our next step here is we're going to remove the bolts on the front fender, because we want to get that out of the way as well, and so we can work on stuff and it won't be in the way. So these are the bolts we're going to remove right now, and once we find out the size, we'll let you know. Okay. I'm Johnny Cash. Okay, Joe is removing the front fender now, and we found that those bolts that are holding the front fender on are 10 millimeter. So we needed a shallow 10 millimeter and a deep well socket to do the job. And there are a total of 4 underneath here, and there is 1 up top, and he's working on that right now. Okay, we got the front fender off there, and there was only 4, you can see there was only 4 bolts that held it on from underneath the fender. This bolt up top, all it does is it probably held some sort of bracket or something, so we didn't need to take it off. We're just going to leave it on the fork tree here, and we're going to start working on getting the front tire off the bike. So as we see here, this is our first time doing this, so we're going to disconnect the brake line here, the brake cable from the front drum, and then we're gonna, after we do that, we'll get back.
This part don't fit.
Okay, this is a 12 millimeter nut here, and we separated the 2 nuts, and we're going to run the jam nut up a little ways, and then we're going to loosen the bottom nut here so that we can get this keeper out of the brake here so that we can get the cable off. Alright, well, we had a little bit of a challenge getting that cable off of the brakes there. They didn't want to give up the ghost. They were kind of stuck in there. The spike's been ridden hard, and so we ended up having to loosen this brake bracket here in order to get the cable out of this keeper here. It was just so much old grease and stuff, it didn't want to come out. So we got that loosened up, and we were able to raise it up here so that we could get the cable out of it. And here's the retaining bolt that was holding that brake bracket in place, and we're gonna reinstall that after we get the front forks off.
Yeah, what the size
okay,
was.
We'll get back to that. Oh, yeah, the size was 10 millimeter on that again. All right, thanks. Okay, we're getting ready to take the front wheel off here, and what we did is we've loosened those 4 retaining bolts right there, and basically that's just a housing that crimps onto the axle to hold the axle from sliding out. So you don't take those all the way off, you just loosen them up and back them off about halfway, and then we're going to take this nut here and run it out. On this era bike, you have to unthread the whole axle. The axle's literally threaded through the forks on the other side, so we're going to have to run that out. And I think that is probably a 22 millimeter, but we'll find out and let you know. Okay, we got the axle out, and basically it, you can see it has pretty long threads, and those threads go right into here. So what we're going to do, we pulled the axle out of the wheel after we got it unthreaded. It was pretty easy, just kind of wiggled it and pulled it out. And now on the other side, these Enduros come with a Speedo. No, we're not going to take that off. We're going to take this one off right here. undo that screw right there, and what that does is that will just release the dummy speedo cable that's on here. There's that would be if you had a speedo on your bike.
Don't forget to tell them the size.
Yeah, the size of this, it ended up being a 17 millimeter. Okay, we just took the front tire out, and if you look, you can see a little closer. We put that nut back through the brake assembly here so that we didn't lose it. And there's the dummy speedo cable. You can see it's just dead-ended, and it's not even a cable. It's just something to keep dirt out of there. So getting the front tire out was very easy. We just once we got that keeper disconnected from the dummy speedo cable, we were able to just pull just roll the tire right out of there. All right. Okay, we're in the process of getting the handlebars off. This will be the next step so we can get the front forks off the bike. So this is the clutch, and what we did is we removed the clutch bolt that holds the handle in place, and basically it's got a keeper nut on the back of it, goes through this hole right here and holds the clutch lever in its place here. So once we got that off, we were able to take the clutch off, rotate it over, and then slide the cable off. And that's it. We're gonna repeat this process for the brake here over on the other side, and then we'll show you how we did the throttle cable as well. And once we get all those things off of there, we'll get the kill switch undone, and then we'll be able to get these handlebars off. And there's the 4 nuts that hold the handlebars in place. Okay, we'll get back to you. Okay, we're back. What we did is we took off the throttle cable, and basically it was just a connector with two Allen screws, and we took those Allen screws off and unconnected the throttle cable, and it's just a little bead that slides into that slot right there. Pretty simple to remove. And then we removed the brake cable off of here, and it was the same process as doing the clutch. So we got that off, and that's good to go. And this also has old school kill switch on the handlebars here, and the wire came down to where we removed the headlight from, and we marked both wires here. We put tape on here and on here so that it'll be easy to reconnect when we reassemble the bike. Okay, right now we're going to remove the handlebars so we can get those out of our way, and those are 12 millimeter bolts. So here we go, we're going to get those off. Okay, we got the handlebars off, and just a little tip. Make sure you take the keepers that hold the handlebars and just put them back on there. Run those nuts down. You don't have to make them snug or anything, but that way you'll know where they're at. If there's any job and tip that I can give is make sure you keep track of where everything is. And what we've done so far is we've taken everything and we mark it. Like, here you go. I mean, this is the clutch and brake levers and their bolts, and they're in a bag marked. So when we go to put this bike back together, everything should be easy to find. All right, that's our tip for the day.
Oh, there's a hole.
Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to get these shocks off. So the first thing you want to do with the shocks is there's on these old school ones, there's a little air fitting on the top of them. So you go ahead and you unscrew the cap. Okay, and then we've already done it, but basically I took a dental tool and you press down the little button inside here and you burp them, and that means just get the air out. And when you're getting the air out of those things, make sure your face isn't in the way, just in case there's any oil that might spray out and get you in the eyes. You don't want that. So burp the air out of them so there's no more air in. And then the second thing you do is these nuts on the top here can be pretty tight. So before you loosen the tree on your shocks, you're going to want to break these nuts loose. So break them loose, and the size on here is a 17 millimeter. So we just used a breaker bar, broke them loose, and we're good to go. So our next step here is we're going to loosen the bolts on the tree here and slide this shock out of the tree, and it'll just be a matter of turning it back and forth and sliding it out. And we're going to go ahead and do that. And these bolts here are 12 millimeter, by the way. Okay, we got the front forks off, and I know both of these front forks are going to need to be rebuilt. And as you can see, this is a smooth part that slides up into the tree here. And on the tree, what you do is you grab a hold of this part of the shock and basically wiggle it back and forth and get below it once you get it broke loose, and just pull it on out by wiggling it back and forth and pulling out, and it comes out pretty easy. Ours came out pretty easy. So this bike is older than the hills, so if ours came out, I'm sure your bikes will come out pretty good too. Prior to doing that, you want to make sure that all these bolts are loose. You don't have to take them all the way out, you just need to loosen them all the way, and then the forks will slide right out the bottom. And we found out that after removing the forks, our tree up here is definitely in need of new bearings. These bearings are shot, so we are going to have to replace the bearings, unfortunately, in the tree. Okay, we kind of got ahead of ourselves without filming this, but this is the side panel on the side of the bike here, and basically there's a nut right here, and it is a 10 millimeter, and you take that nut all the way out, and that comes out of here. Okay, move your hand, and then you pivot this down like this, and then in the front here, the only thing that's holding it is a grommet, and you can see it's just a grommet, and there's a little rubber connector right there, and it just pops right out of there. Okay, and then the next step we're going to do is, we already removed the other side, and it is the duplicate of what we just did there, so we took that side off as well. And now what we're going to do is going to take the seat off so we can get at some of this other stuff. And there's two bolts underneath here that hold that, and they are 12 millimeter, and you remove both of those, and then the seat should pivot straight up. So we'll get that seat off there. Okay, we're going to take off the front tree here, the steering tree, and it definitely needs new bearings. Looking at the top here, there's a retaining nut that holds the whole assembly together. I just broke it loose. It was pretty tight on there. I don't have a socket large enough for that. So what I ended up using is a combination wrench to break it loose, and once I broke it loose, it's coming off pretty good. So I will get that nut off and then show you how the rest of it comes apart. Okay, finally got that nut off the top of this thing. Not having the proper size socket because it's so big, I'm going to have to get one for putting it back together again. This was too much of a challenge with a combination wrench. So got the nut all the way off, and now the way that... Okay, to get this tree broke loose, basically what you do is you hit it on one side and the other side, back and forth, until you finally get that thing broke loose, and then it should just pull right up off of there. Okay, we're good to go there. Alright, we're going to move on to the next... Oh, go ahead and take that off, please. Okay, on the top here, there's a castle, this up here, and what we're going to have to do is break that loose, and we'll use there's a special tool that you can get, but we don't have that tool, so we're going to use a screwdriver and hammer and break that thing loose. Alright, see you in a minute. Okay, this is a dust cover that goes on here, so you basically work that dust cover off, which I did. And then here's that piece there, and I broke it loose with a screwdriver, and basically all I did was I took the screwdriver like this and the hammer. If you could back up a little bit, you'd be able to get everything. There you go. And you hit this like this and it will break that loose. Okay, we just removed that star nut off of there, and there it is. It's threaded, and you just unscrew it the rest of the way off of there. And now he's holding on to the top bearing right there, so go ahead and lift that bearing off of there. Okay, and then drop the tree out, and you can see there's the bottom bearing out. Okay, now we got the tree off of there, and we're going to do a bearing inspection, but I'm sure that they are trashed. So we're going to replace those bearings. Okay, we're going to take off the back fender here, and we have some wires here that we disconnected for the tail light, and they're clearly they're colors that need to go together, so we don't need to mark them. So how we get the fender off now is underneath here there's a bolt there and a bolt on the other side in the same place, and then here in the front there's the mud shield, and we're going to take that off as well. So we're going to get going on that and get the fender off of there. Okay, we removed the two bolts on the fender. The mud guard didn't need to come off to get the fender off, so we're going to just slide it out of the bike, and go ahead and do that. Go ahead and slide it on out. Okay, make sure the wire doesn't get ripped off there. It might be hung up on something. Okay, got the fender off, so we're going to start working on some more. Okay, we're going to get the little Honda toolkit off of here, the box I guess it is, and there's a 10 millimeter bolt inside the cover that needs to come off. Alright. Okay, we're at the point where we're going to get the fuel out of the bike because we want to, start getting into some other stuff here, and we're draining the fuel out. We put a fuel worthy hose, and we're draining it into a gas can right now, and once the fuel tank's drained off, we'll pull it off. And the fuel tank here has a rubber retaining piece that'll hold it on in the back here, and we undid that. And then in the front of the fuel tank there's a bolt on each side that holds the fuel tank on, and once the fuel line is disconnected, which we did already, then you can just lift the gas tank right off. Okay, we pulled the fuel tank off, and as you can see, the throttle cable, which is dangling down there, goes underneath the fuel tank, and then it connects to the carburetor right over here. So we're going to get that throttle cable out of the way so we can get at some other of this stuff on this bike. And basically the throttle cable, you unscrew the top of that, and if we run into anything that's funky, we'll record it. Okay, we pulled the throttle cable out of the bike, and the way you get the cable off is you compress the spring, and you can see there the cable's coming out of there, and you walk that cable down to the side here, and it'll pull right out that hole. And there we go, we got that out. And be very careful not to bend this piece. If you bend it, you're going to be screwed, unfortunately. So don't bend that. But here we got the throttle cable off, and I think we're good. Okay, as you can see, this is where I pulled the throttle cable off the top of the carburetor right here. It just came, once I unscrewed the cap, it came right out. It just pulls straight out of the carburetor. And then here is the air breather attachment where the filtered air comes through, and you can see there's a little retaining ring here. You unloosen that and just pull that off the back of the carburetor. And then on the top here are two bolts that are holding the air box in place, and we're going to get this air box out of the way so we can get this carburetor out. Okay, we ran into a little snag getting the air box out of here. Obviously this is our first go at this particular bike, so we're learning as we go. We took these two bolts off the top here, And then there was another bolt over here on the other side that we had to undo. To pull the airbox out, it'll have to come past this mud guard here. So we got to get this mud guard off. We removed one bolt from here, but this bolt here is behind the exhaust pipe, so we can't get to it without removing the exhaust pipe off of here. So we're going to take the exhaust pipe off, and to do that, we had to loosen this bolt here. This bolt right here we're going to take off, and then this is a slip-on, so we're going to loosen this here, and then the exhaust pipe, the back part, should come right off. So we're gonna get that out of here. Okay, we pulled that back mud shield off. I wanted to show you that the airbox has to come out a certain way on this bike. You have to rotate it to pull it out the back end of the bike, or it won't come out. So and I'm sure it'll be going back in the same way. So rotate it and then pull it straight out the back, and it comes right out. Okay, we took the rest of the exhaust pipe off the bike, and the way we did that is right here in the front of the engine. There's two bolt studs sticking out the front of the block, and two little nuts on there, and they're 10 millimeter. You take those nuts off, and the pipe just fishes right out of the bike, and pretty simple. Okay, removing the carburetor off the bike is a pretty easy deal. There's two nuts holding these on here, and I removed those nuts, but getting the carb out is a little tricky. You have to drop it straight down and turn it to the side in order to get it out of the bike. So just remember, it's going to have to be down, turned to the side before you're going to be able to get it up into its location.